So I've been getting a lot of responses to my video on the Rayshard Brookes incident, and 3,000 views in less than a day certainly speaks to the intensity and the popularity of the issue. However, I wanted to address some of the comments that have been coming in. Now, if you haven't seen the previous videos or my previous commentaries, I want to make something very clear. I'm on the side of Ahmaud Arbery. I'm on the side of George Floyd. I'm on the side of Christian Cooper. I'm on the side of Breonna Taylor. I am not on the side of Rayshard Brookes. And I did my previous video on the topic, really explored why and everything. But I wanted to answer some of the comments that are coming in. The first one comes from Lord Sypho1, and he says, "Okay, so just happened to run into your video, and I listened to it. You seem like a rational white person, and I would like to have some dialogue with you. Hopefully you will take me up on this offer." Sure, but first of all, I am not a rational white person. I'm just a rational person. Stop putting racial clarifiers. If you want to de-escalate racial tension and you want to de-escalate the degree to which race is factored into your people's perception of you and the general perception of the population as a whole, then you need to factor it out where it doesn't apply in your own speech and your own discussion. That's the first thing any of us can do to de-escalate the amount of racial tension. I'm a rational person. I'm not a rational white person. Or I should say the fact that I'm white doesn't have any bearing on it. So you went back and was in support of past victims of police murder in the United States, but with Rayshard, you believe his murder was justified. Okay, stop right there. Previous actions taken by the police were murder. What happened to George Floyd was murder. What happened to Breonna Taylor was murder. What happened to Ahmaud Arbery was murder, albeit not by the police. So in those cases, yes, those people were murdered. This is not murder, what happened here. Murder is unlawful killing. And this is, I'm pro-choice. And this is an argument that I have with pro-life people a lot. They want to say abortion is murder. And it's like, no. Murder is unlawful killing. I understand murder is an emotionally loaded word, especially when you feel that someone was killed in an unjustifiable manner. But nevertheless, I understand why it feels viscerally correct, but nevertheless, this was not a murder. That's important. Anyway, because he fled from the cops and pointed a taser at one of the officers, and by doing that, it was justified to blow his back out and kill this man, right? Okay, and there's more here, but I'm going to speak to that first point. So, I will include a link to this, but if you join me on the website nolo.com, the article is how much force officers can use during arrest. And on the issue of deadly force, it says, the U.S. Supreme Court established that a police officer who has probable cause to believe a suspect poses a threat of serious harm to the officer or others may use deadly force to prevent escape. Tennessee v. Garner, 471 U.S. 1, 1985. This might happen, for instance, if the suspect threatens the officer with a gun. The court, however, indicated that officers should use warnings when possible. The officer, in this case, if you watch the I included in my original video the body cam footage. The officer did warn him that he would be tased if he didn't back down, so he did use a warning. It is also held that deadly force is unjustified when the suspect poses no immediate threat to the officer and no threat to others. He's already assaulted the officer. He's assaulted the officer. He's demonstrated that he poses a threat. Taking the gun and firing at an officer poses a threat. Now, a lot of people have been writing in and saying, "Oh, well, the officer, it was only a taser. The officer was not in immediate danger." Actually, wrong. Very wrong. If he gets shot with that taser, it's going to shut down his body for several seconds. In some cases, from what I understand, in some cases as long as 10 seconds, that officer is going to be physically incapacitated. In that time, the suspect could take his gun, the suspect could come back and start beating on him again, any of those things. So that does place the officer in considerable danger if he gets hit with that taser. Also, not everybody responds to a taser the same way. Depending on the person, it could stop his heart. It could cause him to have a seizure. There are a number of issues associated with using that taser. The taser is meant to be a step between that and the gun, or a step between the initial encounter and pulling out the gun. Yes, course, he didn't have the gun. But anyway, we can debate whether or not the use of deadly force in general, we can debate about the use of deadly force in general in police, in cases of police encounters, and whether or not it's necessary when it is and is not a good idea. That can be open for debate, and that can be open for reform if necessary. But as it stands, these officers acted completely within the bounds of the law. They did not attempt to impose deadly force until it was clear that this man posed a threat to the officers. Also, he was a DUI, so it had already been established that he posed threat of reckless endangerment to other people. So anyway, returning to Cypher's comment, so let me let's see. So let me ask you, how do we not know that this victim didn't have a mental illness, or maybe he was strung out on heavy narcotics? Okay, and he says that cop was not in danger from having a taser pointed at him. We already established that he was. So then there's one more thing he says, but he says, how do we know he didn't have a mental illness? How do we know he wasn't strung out on heavy narcotics? Okay, understand I'm someone who wants to end the drug war altogether. I want all drugs to be legalized, but as it stands, heavy narcotics are illegal, and certainly, so if he was on them, he had committed a crime by using them. And certainly if he was on heavy narcotics, like certain ones like PCP, for example, will make you more violent. So I don't see how that's a cause for restraint on behalf of the police. That's a cause for greater heightened concern for physical well-being of themselves and others from the police. But then it comes back to how do we know he didn't have a mental illness? Well, the answer to that comes from an episode of the show House MD, where they directly address this question of there's a character that's being rude and insulting people this kid may have a mental illness that's causing him to uncontrollably say things, insulting things to people. And one of the doctors says something that describes it perfectly. It wouldn't be his fault if he had the flu. I still wouldn't let him sneeze on me. And that's the answer right there. I mean, if you have a mental illness, yes, there may be behavior, and you're speaking to someone who does have mental health issues himself. I don't like to use the term mental illness because it's very loaded. But yeah, if you have mental health issues, those issues are very real, and they can be factored into things like leniency when you actually go before the judge and that sort of thing. But there is a certain requirement for personal responsibility if you are going to be out functioning in the world. If you are so mentally deranged that you cannot function without harming other people, that is a problem, and you still remain legally, as long as you are judged to be legally competent, you remain legally responsible for your actions and for your decisions. And so while that can be something that can be brought up later on, you could try to say not guilty by reason of insanity or something like that. That is not something, the cops have to go into it based solely on what they're encountering in the moment. And no police officer is going to sit there and let himself be pounded on because the guy has a mental illness. Again, if the guy, for whatever reason, if the person is demonstrating themselves to be out of control physically, then that is reasonable cause for the police to restrain that person's actions. He goes on to say, let me backtrack real fast. First, I don't condone what the victim did. It was senseless and not rational, but once again, maybe he was sick mentally, so you're telling me this man deserves to die that night because of a bad decision. No, he doesn't deserve to die that night because of a bad decision. I don't think he even necessarily deserved to die. The fact that he was shot and died is not necessary. It's not something that was happening on an overall value judgment of whether or not it was deserved. What was being dealt with was only what happened in the moment, and in the moment, he was a violent, out-of-control individual. I don't, and understand when I said I feel like I should clarify, I don't relish what happened to him. You know, in my, I don't normally like to talk about these things, but in my prayers last night, I prayed for him and his family, and I don't relish what happened, and I'm not thrilled by what happened at all. I think it's sad. I think it is very, very tragic and truly unfortunate, but the cops were acting, coming down to the question of whether or not the cops acted correctly in the situation, I believe that they did. And seeing the body cam footage, they warned him repeatedly, even after he was physically assaulting him, they warned him that they would escalate the force if he did not calm down. So this was absolutely, this was the polar opposite of what happened with George Floyd, where with George Floyd, the initial story the cops used was that they had to hold him down and put a knee on his neck so they could get the handcuffs on him. The footage comes out and shows that George Floyd had the handcuffs on him long before he got the knee on his neck. So their story is bupkis, sorry. Their story is bunk. It's ridiculous in that case. So in this case, however, proper procedure was followed. These cops seemed very mellow and very patient the whole time up until the point where he started getting violent. And so the next question that follows, I'm going to summarize one question that a lot of people brought up, or one point that a lot of people brought up, is the idea of, oh, well, what if you're a black person in this country that has grown up seeing all their brothers and sisters being treated this way by the police on TV, and you're terrified that you're about to die, etc., etc. What then? Okay, we're talking about two separate issues. The cops were not behaving in whatever his justification for his actions. The cops did not behave in an inappropriate manner. They were trying to take him into custody because he was a drunk driver, which means he was a danger to himself and others. Now, people have said, well, the guy offered to walk to his sister's house. I've watched the footage. The guy's not even entirely sure where he is. So, at best, all the cops have to go on is, or would have to assume there as well, we let the guy wander off into the night by himself. Being in the drunk tank is probably a lot safer than whatever would have happened if he had wandered off by himself. But he goes and, sorry, got distracted, brain fart. But anyway, trying to say, oh, well, he'll walk to his sister's house, whatever, does not negate the fact that he committed the crime of driving while intoxicated, driving under the influence, and he admitted that he had done this. So they are still required to take him in. Now, the thing is that I feel like there's an assumption, there's like a colloquial assumption that goes on that, like, oh, if he was white, they would have let him go and pat him on the back and send him off. There's no way of knowing what could have happened in a hypothetical situation, but assuming the worst about what could have happened in a different situation does not change what did happen in this situation. And then also, okay, so he's afraid. Now, coming around to it from the other angle, he is scared for his life because he's been watching everything on the news lately, and he's terrified that he's going to be next. Well, there is no perfect answer to this and no perfect solution. There is no way to perfectly address this issue, because put it this way, what is the other thing that we've had to deal with in this country this year, in the world really, in this year? Coronavirus. Okay, think about it this way. Hospitals have had a huge influx of coronavirus patients, but guess what? They still have to deal with all the other stuff that hospitals have to deal with every day. So all of that does not go away because of the influx of coronavirus. Similarly, cops don't really have the option of not doing their jobs just because there's a major national discussion going on about police brutality. And I think, honestly, I think the discussion we're having, the way we're having it, is worsening the situation, because now every cop in the back of his mind is going to have to go into a situation thinking, is this going to make national headlines? Am I going to get in trouble for doing my job? Anyway, the way he felt, it's unfortunate if he felt that way. I sympathize with that, and one thing I've wanted to do is a video talking about my bad experiences with police officers, especially the ones I feel were racially motivated towards me. But I know I've never been arrested, but certainly I've been, cornered and questioned by the cops in very, very intense and very belligerent ways. And I know the feeling of, you know, when you're in that moment of law enforcement bearing down on you and you don't know what kind of chip this guy has on his shoulder or anything, I understand it's terrifying. I've been there, and I know you're always going to want to move the goalpost and say, oh, well, you don't know what it's like because you're not black, you haven't lived this experience. Well, that's wrong for two reasons. One, because you assume that there's one unilateral experience of being black. And, you know, if you want proof that there's not, just look at the comments sections on these videos, like mine, where you have black people writing in with one point of view, black people writing in with another point of view, black people writing in with a view that's on a spectrum between the two. I mean, there's not one unified experience. The other thing is, not only do I not know what it's like to have your experience, you don't know what it's like to have my experience. It is entirely possible in this metaphysical, philosophical discussion we're now having, it's entirely possible that you would have my experience and come away with, or the experience of a white person at my socioeconomic level, and come away with it thinking, oh, damn, we're not that different. Oh, maybe it is a human universal. Maybe it's not. Maybe I've been looking at it the wrong way. I'm not saying you would. I'm saying it's within the realm of possibility. But we can't have each other's discussions, or experiences. We can't have each other's life experiences. It just is not going to occur. The best we can do is work off of our empathy. And to that end, whenever someone tells me, oh, you can't understand because you're white, first of all, whenever I hear that, I assume that their mental image of a white person is somebody sitting on a private yacht, you know, smoking fine cigars and drinking mojitos and being fanned by Nubian servants and palm fronds or something like that. But no, actually, my existence is many, many echelons below that in the extreme. And so, losing my train of thought again. Thinking about how nice it would be to have a private yacht, but I wouldn't want to maintain it. FreedomBoatClub.com. Anyway, I should get an endorsement from them. But the point being, when we come back to that question of that point of you have not lived this as a black person, you don't know how it goes or how it feels. My question to you is, okay, if I cannot come around to your understanding because I'm white and not black, okay, I've never been a slave, I'm opposed to slavery. I've never been raped, I'm opposed to rape. I have been sexually assaulted, I've never been raped, I'm opposed to rape. I've never been a victim of human trafficking, I'm opposed to human trafficking. I've never been in a concentration camp, I'm opposed to concentration camps. You go down the list, all of these things I've never experienced, but I understand why it is a basic human rights violation. We have made this discussion very popular in the country now, that there's this base level of fear that minorities live with that white people don't have. That is a separate video discussion, because part of me wonders how much of that is a result of cultural ingraining on part of the minority culture itself, especially in black culture. And this is something that Coleman Hughes has talked about, something that John McWhorter has talked about, which is that part of black culture is ingraining a fear of white people, and especially a fear of white police. And at what point does that become, at what point is that doing more damage than it's solving? At what point is that teaching you to see the enemy everywhere? At what point is that teaching you to feel oppressed when you're not? And that's something that I run into a lot. This is getting how are we doing on time? Okay, this is getting off the topic, but that's something I've run into a lot in discussions like with with black friends that I've had. When a phenomenon I had, I graduated from a predominantly black high school, so I have a lot of black friends that I've kept in touch with, especially on Facebook. And when I say I have black friends, I'm not trying to do the white people, token gesture thing. I mean, I actually have a lot of black friends. On top of that, I work in the music scene in Atlanta, so, go figure. But what I run into a lot of the time, I have had people tell me examples of specific bad interactions they've had with police, with white people, racist interactions. But one statement that I keep coming back to is black people who tell me, I say, what do you experience on a daily basis? Racism do you experience on a daily basis? And they say, I have to live with the knowledge that, and then they start quoting statistics to me, that I'm this percent more likely than a white person to do this and that. They start quoting statistics to me. And it's like, okay, so you live with the knowledge of statistics, just like, it's just like the Mary Koss Ms. Magazine rape study comes out, erroneously and fallaciously claiming that women have a 1 in 4 chance of being raped. The actual number is much higher, or I should say, the actual odds are much, you say higher or lower, I think. But anyway, it's something more like 1 in 63. Obviously, any rape is too much rape. But by teaching women that, you teach them to have a level of fear that they don't need to have. Ergo, they perceive a level of oppression that doesn't actually exist. And so I worry that that's what's happening here, because statistics, there's a saying, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And you can twist and manipulate statistics to mean anything you want it to mean. And so if you, as a black person, are, if you are daily having horrible run-ins with the police and horrible run-ins with white people, I don't mean microaggressions. I mean things that are so-called microaggressions where you interpret something a certain way. I mean like overt, blatant racism. If you're experiencing these things, that's one thing. That's something we can address. But when it's this thing of you live with the knowledge that gets into a different area. I could say there are people. So, like for example, Ben Shapiro, who I oftentimes disagree with, but I think he's done a good job of being a voice of sanity and reason in a lot of this lately. He makes the point that white people are statistically more likely to get shot by police officers. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but the thing is, statistically more likely is a very difficult thing to pin down. I'll give you so I choose not to live with the fear. I could take that statistic and say, oh, well, I have a greater chance. No, I choose not to live on the basis of that fear, and that's a very important thing. And that's something that I have to choose to do, and I don't think it gets any easier because I'm white. I really don't. But to give you an example of how statistics work, there is a common statistic that goes around that after a woman is past 35, her chances of giving birth to a child that has Down syndrome or autism or some other developmental disability double. Okay, the show Adam Ruins Everything actually went in there, which I have mixed feelings about that show, but here they made a good point. They went in and they pointed out, if you look at the actual data, yes, her chances double. They go from 0.5% to 1%. That's the thing. That's the thing. When you talk about statistics, there is usually a larger context that makes them make sense. That is why people go to college to become trained statisticians, because when it comes to statistics, we can sit here and scare the living hell out of ourselves left and right every day. But moving on, let's see. Cosmic Klutz says, I have never seen an arrest carried out by police saying, put your hands behind your back for me. Police are supposed to be criticized for how they execute their duties. These people are vetted and trained to carry out their tasks and can't even do it right. Look at the body cam footage. They put one cuff on him and he immediately starts and say, put your hands behind your back for me. And you don't know that they were not going to read him his Miranda rights next, or something like that. It immediately, there is no opportunity for the arrest to be done incorrectly because he starts resisting immediately. Yeah, someone named Open Show. I won't read the whole statement. Thank you for the kind words up front. But then he says, why did he resist, fight, run? If you know of mass incarceration in the justice system, then maybe this is more understandable. Did the police have the right to kill him? Did he deserve to die? Well, the answer is easy to me. It's a hard no. Again, we get back to that deserve thing, but it comes back to, no, actually the law allows for what they did. The law completely allows for it. Yeah. So anyway, someone says, "Sir, he's running away from the cops. How is shooting him to death justified? Disgusting to see, hear, logic." You are. And it's, so people are mostly getting it, getting the responses. Like they say, they didn't shoot him for running. They shot him because he used a taser on them. He already stolen the weapon, so et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the thing is, and another thing that got pointed out. I'm just checking how much time we have. Another thing that got pointed out is a couple things about the Wendy's, the burning down of the Wendy's that I wanted to talk about. One person pointed out that there's video footage that it was a white woman who set the fire to the building, and my question is, what's your point? Well, first of all, the guy who got on camera with NBC and said the more the more of these killings that happen, the more of these buildings were going to burn down. He's still making terroristic threats, irrespective of whether or not he set the actual fire. Then, as far as the woman setting it, the ethnicity really doesn't prove anything. We don't know her motivation, and she could have been motivated by support for Rayshard Brookes, or support for some malevolent intention towards the Wendy's in relation to all this. So I really don't think makes the point. I really don't think that matters. But then the question arose, people have been saying that the Wendy's handled the situation the wrong way by responding to, or the Wendy's handled it the wrong way by calling the police in the first place. I said, well, what were they supposed to do? And the response to this person, which I haven't looked it up, but dude, you know who you are, the person I'm responding to, your avatar is a green thing. You are posting so much that every single time you post something, I have to go through the spam folder and approve everything that you're saying. So, like, you can slow down. All right, none of what you're saying is spam, or I wouldn't approve it. But you can slow down with it. Anyway, but he says, what should the Wendy's have done differently? I said to him, what should the Wendy's have done differently? And he said they should have hired private security. No, they did the right thing. The police officers are there to protect and serve the rights of everybody, including the Wendy's employees. And by the way, the corporate megastructure that everybody's so angry at does not factor into this. This is a local franchise owned by a local person. This is not the corporation stomping down on one teeny tiny individual. Anyway, so first of all, if he's sleeping in their parking lot, there's been discussion about whether or not he was blocking the drive-through lane. He was blocking the drive-through lane, and he's asleep blocking the drive-through lane. So that's an issue. That is reason enough to call the police. Furthermore, if he's sleeping in their parking lot, that is vagrancy. He should not be. That is vagrancy, and he should not be behind the wheel of a car if he's intoxicated. So they're right to call the police. The police exist to mediate these encounters. And the idea that, there's this idea going around that you're wrong the minute you call the police. No, this is what the police are there for. They did not do anything wrong in calling the police. So I understand something. This last couple of weeks has been an emotional whirlwind for Me Too. Me Too as in me including myself, not the Me Too movement. But anyway, this is what happens when we co-opt regular patterns of speech for political discussion. Anyway, or political ideologies. But anyway, I've been there, and I know it feels like it seems like there is, not seems like there is, a sense that blacks should be should consider themselves more aggrieved than everybody else. And the reality, I could do a whole other video on this, but the reality of it is, until we're able to come together as one people and say, this is not that this is a crime against this particular demographic, but that these are crimes against crimes of police brutality are crimes against all of us equally, and all people and all humans, and look beyond that. Until we come to that point, we're not going to see a resolution to this. And I know that seems counterintuitive, and I understand that it seems like a white person saying something that's self-serving to white people, but the reality is that we have got to look at the larger whole of what we are as a people and what we are as a society. The overwhelming majority of white people are not your enemy, and that's and I say that just because basic human nature, most people are not looking for a fight. Most people are not looking to fuck with you. Most people are not conspiring to keep you down. And that's the thing. We have built up this idea that there is this this like Illuminati level force behind white people. And that's something else that it's a whole topic for a whole other video, but that's something that we have got to overcome in the interest of overcoming racism. Because the thing is, until we do that, until we can start to establish mutual trust, we're going to be going around in circles forever. And I know that there's a lot of people who say that that's wrong, and a lot of people, the Michael Eric Dysons of the world and the Robin DiAngelos of the world and everybody else have been telling you that you should absolutely not look at yourself and other people as an individual, that you should not practice individualism, that's going to be a surefire route to you getting killed, etc., etc. But just stop and remember that if racism were over, Michael Eric Dyson's bank account would be empty, and Robin DiAngelo's bank account would be empty. And a whole lot of these other people that are telling you to think of white people as an evil cabal working against you, their bank accounts would be empty. I do not deny that blacks have experienced racism. But there are certain things that, as this Lord Cypher guy, or whatever his name was, mentioned, yeah, I'm rational. And being rational, there are certain points where I start to think, okay, this is something you've experienced, this is something you've been told. And that's going to affect your perception. Anyway, end of today's sermon. Hope that was helpful.